This episode was recorded February 8th, 2026. Welcome to Muckrakers, where we dig through the latest happenings around so-called AI. In each episode, we highlight recent events, contextualize the most important ones, and try to separate muck from meaning. I'm your host, Jacob Hames, and joining me is my co-host, Igor Kravchuk.
Thank you, Jacob. This week we're talking about the mythical AI bears.
Ooh, sounds fun. There is something that I think is worth mentioning, though. So we're recording this on, Super Bowl Sunday, which to majority of the world doesn't mean anything. But in the U.S., that's a time when people, get together and watch football, American football, whatever.
I thought it was mainly the ads, but the football is at this point just the additional thing, and everybody is just willingly tuning in to watch the halftime ad show. I thought that was the core of American culture now.
No, people. Well, there's been a push for sports betting. They've been doing a lot of ads, and that's gathered some attention. Anthropic has, I think, 4, and I don't know which one they're gonna run for the Super Bowl, but there are companies pay tons of money to make bombastic ads for the Super Bowl because it is a watching event that has a lot of different people tuned in. Anthropic made a bunch about how Anthropic will never have ads in its AI systems, clearly poking fun of OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is integrating ads in a manner in the near future. And Sam Altman got pissed about it. Sam Altman was not happy, and he went on a little rant.
He wrote, I think, over 10 paragraphs of how he isn't bothered by the ads at all, and he finds them quite funny, and he finds the irony of Anthropic being so draconian and authoritarian with their terms of service, that you can't do everything with their AI systems, unlike OpenAI, which has in the terms of service only roughly the same restrictions, but would just allow you to put ads into users' streams and at some point make porn with it.
To be fair, the argument is the way that it is represented in the commercials is not what's actually happening. And while that may be true,
I would
right
against
now
that. It's not at all not true. It's very simple. OpenAI is gonna put ads into ChatGPT. They did announce that, and that changed the incentive structure. And Sam desperately wants to spin it a different way, but it's just in German there's a saying that if you hit a dog, it will yelp, and I think this is a dog yelping.
Well, that's very German.
We did make the Grimm fairy tales.
Speaking of fairy tales, right? Back to the mythical AI bear, which is not what you want it to be, which is a friendly, maybe sort of cyborg-esque bear that's wearing a little shirt, maybe has some shifting colors in parts of its fur. No,
it's wise, but there's no bears in this story. We're talking about the strawman that are constructed by, let's say, AI boosters, but we don't mean this now as a insult. Just people who are very hyped about AI, they sometimes struggle to get why people aren't as hyped as they are. And some of them, to varying degrees, construct what we call the mythical AI bear. So it's a strawman of AI skeptics' positions. And we thought it was important to discuss these and address these and complete the framing with something a bit, what we think is a more fairer representation.
Yeah, and I guess then the just to give the TLDR of our assessment is it is a straw man. These are straw man arguments that are being presented as what people who don't like AI are saying, and it really misrepresents what those people are actually saying and tries to sort of erase their actual critiques from the discourse. And that's not like, as a result, people have a misunderstanding of what critiques actually are, and it serves the boosters more.
Yeah. And our starting point, I think we should either look into like how people have been framing Emily Bender and Gary Marcus and Ed Citron and stuff like that, or we could go
Mhm.
into the all of my AI skeptic friends are nuts blog post. What do you think is better here?
Yeah, so I guess maybe we'll just say that there have been quite a lot of articles. There is a recent one titled "All My AI Skeptic Friends Are Nuts" or something close to that. I might have gotten the name slightly wrong. It'll be in the show notes. But this has gotten like a lot of attraction on the Y Combinator Hacker News forum, I guess. I think it starts by just sort of providing the like a really strong outline, and then we can dig into more aspects.
And I think it's important to say like we're using this because like this is mainly a vibes-driven show, as is the zeitgeist of our times. But I would say this is like a good representation of AI positive opinions and like tech opinions that is. It's not like some fringe takes on how people respond to criticism. This is like reasonable summary of how at least a chunk of a optimist crowd thinks. That's why we're starting with this kind of like as a prototype or archetype to frame a discussion.
Yeah, so I mean, the first one, like, but you have no idea what the code is, essentially says like, if you don't know what the code is, you should be reading it, right? So it sort of externalizes the consequence there of not writing it yourself. It's like blaming you as the person uh, for not fully reading your code that everyone has told you you don't necessarily need to read in full, and that incentives and pressures from like higher ups at your company are telling you to move faster and faster, so you're being forced to ship code that you understand less and less. It's actually your fault that you aren't reading that code, and so you should feel bad, right?
And like,
I
let's
don't know.
just continue through this before we give our takes. Like the next two, but hallucination and but the code is shitty, like a developer. His retort to this is basically there's linters, there's compilers, there's toolings. Like if hallucination matters, your programming language is bad, and but the code is shitty. He responds, but it's very cheap. And for the first cuts, we shouldn't kid ourselves how good the human first cuts are, so like the initial draft of a code.
And I did mention, but it's bad at Rust because I skipped the third headline, which is, but the code is shitty like that of a junior developer. So let's lump, but it's bad at Rust into here too.
Yeah, where it basically says like you should choose better languages, and
Yeah, like suck at Rust is basically what he says.
and like if we step back and we now go to the archetype that this is being done, this is basically people thought, oh, but my workflow works, so you just need to get better at it. Like this is like one of the common framings that people give out to criticism of AI workflows not delivering the goods is, but it works for me, so you just need to try harder enough. And if we go to the framing of the Mythical AI Bear, like this misses the criticism because like what we argue, like the criticism that people bring is that hey, you're promising all of these world-changing things, and it's not working. And instead of acknowledging that, the retort is, "Oh, it will work soon. You just need to like change the way you work, or get good nerd, or like stop using stuff that doesn't work then." And without debating also, I think it's important to note that these are not actually answers of the critique that it isn't working as advertised.
I think going back to the first one, the like that really bugs me here is people saying, but you have no idea what the code is. An argument that you could respond with is, oh well, you should be reading the code. However, that makes a lot of assumptions. It makes the assumption that you fully understand and have the time to do that. And when you have something that works and your manager or whatever says, "Oh, that works, let's ship it," you don't have necessarily as much ground to stand on and say, actually, I don't know if it's secure enough. I don't know if it's robust to all of these edge cases, because they're seeing it and it works. And so they're going to force you to ship things faster and faster and faster until you don't have that luxury of knowing what is written. Either because you just can't like spend the time to understand what's actually happening within the processes that are written, or because you aren't even allowed to do that. You aren't even doing that, right? You're just skipping that portion of reading, and then that also goes to the butt hallucination issue. If you're having to, if there's even a slight concern that you need to go back in and manually check everything, then that is not as much value as what it is being sold as. The other thing is that I'm sure that a lot of people are being able to do this to a certain extent, right? Where they write up some vibe coded tool or whatever, and then pass that on to either their manager or a coworker or someone else that's lead on a specific portion of the project, and they think, "Yep, I did that without having to do much work at all. That was fantastic." And then you go to the person that they passed it off to, and either that person also doesn't care, or more likely, eventually you get to someone that actually does care, and then that person's work is, like 2-3x'd, because now they not only have to do the thing that they were supposed to do themselves, but they also have to go back and make sense of and close all the gaps for the work that was done by your vibe coding. And so you've just externalized all of your work onto someone else that you work with. And I think there was a study, I think it's a little old now, like a year or so, that showed that there was like a negative sentiment to using AI for certain tasks in certain vocations, because it was externalizing the work. It's giving it to other people and saying, well, I don't have to do it, so I guess I save time, but that's not looking at the picture holistically. So it really, I don't know, that part irritates me a lot, because it's just a very self-centered way to think about things.
Yeah, like from experience, if you're in an like AI happy, like leading edge environment, you will usually be lucky enough that like people know that you're vibe coding and there's like a bit of awareness around that. But what still remains is the value is greatly diminished if you have to review the code manually, and you can get around it if you set up massive systems to validate the code. But that's what I meant, like the points that these 3 or 4 articles are responding to is basically about, hey, this value proposition that it was being touted is not there yet, and this massively changes the way I work, and therefore I don't see the value of this tool. And the response is basically, get good, like you lean into it, just adapt to the tool and manifest. Like you need to try hard enough and it will work.
And it also requires people to, I don't know, the model, at least to me, always requires someone to not do that. Because if you need the manual stopgap of a human that actually cares about the output to be in the system so that they actually go in and verify things, as soon as there is, full adoption of this mentality, like its validity goes away, right?
Well, like the stable point, the Steelman point would be that it will be just part of your job to take care of that, but this also is kind of a shitty deal. Cory Doctorow coined the term reverse centaur for this, where like humans become the bitches of robots and AI systems instead of the AI systems being our tools and taking care of like the boring shit. And so instead, like in the best case scenario of at least the type of rebuttal that is in these 3 paragraphs. Humans spend a lot of time reading and correcting code and bug fixing code that was generated, and large amounts of it, because the whole point is that you can churn out features faster, which is the worst part of programming. The worst part of software engineering is having to wade through other people's code and fix it up. At least with humans and interns, they learn something and they try to not give you slop after a while. But with LLMs, you basically need to do the effort that will not occur. But let's go to the next batch, I would say.
Sure. So the next batch is, but the craft, but the mediocrity, and but it'll never be AGI.
I would bundle these as kind of trying to frame it as just bleeding hearts who care too much or who have some weird moralistic or philosophical sentiment, and very thoughts. If I summarize the paragraphs a bit, like I just read the first one. Do you like fine, like for but the craft? He says like, do you like fine Japanese woodworking, all hand tools and sashimono joinery? Me too. Do it on your own time. For but the mediocrity, it's as a late career coder, I've come to appreciate mediocrity. You should be so lucky as to have it flowing almost effortlessly from a tap. But I'll never be AGI. He just says, I don't give a shit. And I think it's important to say that the message of this article is kind of trying to convince people to adopt the tools. So from I think the self-image is a pragmatist stance of just somebody who wants to ship things and just get things done. And I would say that part of the points here are like kind of correct readings of things, where the tension between the love of the craft and what is good for the business is like an eternal one. And there's I would argue, like a genuine argument to make about, yes, artisanal, wonderful benches and tables crafted from sustainably grown trees are wonderful, but they're also super expensive, and people need benches and tables, and IKEA actually has a lot of value. And if they could also be sustainable, that would be awesome. But industrialization of code being something that you can't just slap away with, oh, but the craft is valid. However, I still think that this is a dismissal, because when people say, oh, but the craft, it's also like all of the other externalities that come with it. We already talked about the fact that de facto there will be a reduction of like quality in an industry where there's already low quality standards, because you can't review all of the code. People also won't learn the craft anymore because they can't like make their own mistakes anymore, because the LLM makes it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it disrupts the pipeline. And when people are talking about like, oh, but the craft, it's not just like some vague bleeding heart whining. There's like concrete critiques about like the systemic effect of AI systems in there. And in the section that responds to this, he writes something like, nobody cares if the logic board traces are pleasingly rooted. If anything we build endures, it won't be because of the code base was beautiful. If you're taking time carefully golfing functions down into graceful, fluent, minimal function expressions, alarm bells should ring. You're yak shaving. The real work has the ability to focus. You're not building, you're self-soothing. And his point is basically that if you make beautiful code, you are not producing value. And I disagree with that, because it dismisses the value of like maintainability on top of everything else that I said here.
At least for me, and how I understand it, the but the craft argument is more about the learning process, right? Like, and to be fair, the entry level jobs have been going away for a long time, and so that's not necessarily something that's brand new with AI. However, this is a trend that is seen in software as a result of largely AI within the recent past, right? Entry level software positions are much less common, are much harder to get because people aren't using them as much. And so the craft is necessarily hurt because you're not getting people up to that level of, they can actually do this. And that's sort of like an enshittification argument, and there are other dynamics there as well. But the argument that is treated as a sometimes we like artisanal stuff, and that's nice, but in general, you don't get those things for like most use cases, which just like very much misses the point and misrepresents, I think, a large portion of what's being stated here. And I would.
The point being that it's about the learning pipeline of the underlying discipline being disrupted and erosion of quality.
Well, like I think you mentioned before, like the enshittification of like how it's now very expensive and much more difficult to come by like high quality steel, right?
Yes, because the story there was that low quality steel was much more scalable to produce, and so it got used in more and more applications, which then destroyed the like scaling economics and unit economics of high quality steel. And now the tiny parts where you really have to use high quality steel, it's much more expensive now.
Right. And I see. I mean, it's a perfect parallel to this, right? And if we're not careful, which why would we be? We very easily get into a situation where we're 10, 15 years down the line, and there are only a handful of people that can actually, support and maintain your code base in, some area, because everyone else just uses language models to do it. That's sort of how I see it. And I think but the mediocrity is just a continuation of this argument. I don't see anything new there. To me, I mean, a lot of the AI stuff is about marketing, right? It's being marketed as an everything tool. And so if I critique the companies and say, they shouldn't be doing this, they shouldn't be marketing a tool as an everything tool, when yes, it has specific use cases that are valuable, but it should not be used more generally, because it just won't be good for doing those things. Like, it misses the point. This person specifically at the beginning says, I'm only talking about language models for and agentic agent coders or whatever for the use case of coding. I'm not talking about all of these other domains that people have critiques in. And again, that's missing the point, because it's not being sold as this is specifically useful as a coding tool. It is being sold as this is something you can replace anything with. And so when you provide legitimacy to a portion of it, you're actually boosting this false narrative. I don't know. I feel like it almost intentionally reduces the scope by saying, oh yeah, I'm not going to worry about all these other things that the tool clearly is being said to be able to be doing, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So then, do you want to go through the next 5 points in one go? Because then I think we have like summarized like both like we have like but they take our jobs, but the plagiarism, positive case redux, but I'm tired of hearing about it. Then we have kind of like jumped through the whole article and commented on it.
Yeah. So the main two like headings that are left as, I would say, strawman critiques are the but they take our jobs and but the plagiarism. So but they take our jobs is basically like yeah, so does everything. That's what capitalism does. That's what software does. Um, we already did it, so you shouldn't, like, to other people, so we shouldn't feel bad, or we should be okay with doing it to ourselves, which just doesn't really, like, that just sort of is like, yeah, but like I got rich when we could do it, so it's okay, right?
Yeah, there's like many ways of reading this, and like I'm not sure if people know Terry Pratchett, like the Discworld novels here, but there's a wonderful concept in those novels called as the traitor goat, which is like a goat that knows nothing will happen to it, so it is like calm as it leads other animals into the butchery, and like the other animals don't come out, but the traitor goat will. And uh, old school leftists have a concept called workers aristocrats, which were like highly paid specialist workers that were basically living in golden cages and that temporarily align their interests with the capital class against the other workers.
Right. ICE. I mean, yeah.
Because they will basically be stomped on less in exchange, and like the last point was like he might already have his like sheep in the dry, might be a part of it as well. But it's basically telling people to not worry about it if their job's being taken, because surely at some point the wealth will trickle down, is a very like disingenuous and like removed from reality argument. And I don't think it's at all unreasonable for people to not want to feed a coding machine that will train on their code to replace them, or to point out the impact that these systems have on the wider job market, which is like widely reported now. Like at least as an excuse. Like I'm still skeptical about the actual replacement happening, but it is at the very least like aimed at replacing people with lower quality things if they can get away with it, and it's being used as a justification for hiring freezes and layoff waves and so on. And the whole value proposition is exactly that. So calling it so does open source, which is like the leading line, is very disingenuous. Because open source was freely given by people and has created a lot of values and jobs. This is the exact opposite. This is an enclosure of the commons. And just because you might make it big because you're like part of the tech worker capitalist class, does not mean like you get to dismiss people pointing that out. And as for the plagiarism, it's just absolute.
Well, so I mean, to be fair, the plagiarism starts with like artists. I think who make this claim are reasonable, and so are lawyers, but not coders, right? Like what? I can't even understand what the what the stance is here. Like it's the same construct that is being discussed. I don't understand why it's valid for artists when it's not valid for other professions.
It's because he is doing motivated reasoning. Like the reason why I was struggling to express it is because no profession has demonstrated more contempt for intellectual property. It's okay now. That's kind of like the best reading I can get from this. And like this kind of like staying back in like a non-engagement. Like it is very similar to how people during the NFT craze responded to like artists and copyright holders about unauthorized NFTs being sold against their will, which is basically, but I really wanted to, and that's the only take I can give both on this article, but also like on the wider question. Like people just want to deny the validity of that argument with some vague hand waving of like IP rights bad and everything should be free, but not my stuff, of course. That you have to pay for. The last point that he makes is like positive case redux, where he like hypes it up a bit, but I'm tired of hearing about it. And on the title of I'm hearing about it, he actually like rejoins the choir. But he kind of does it in a pretty hype way. He kind of says, okay, LLMs are being hyped to death, and it's annoying that there's so much marketing. And then he goes like, oh, but the AI is also incredibly important. And he compares it to smartphones in 2008. And he calls critiques like the stochastic parrot and vibe coding being called as problematic things, as cool kid haughtiness that will not survive much more contact with reality. And I quote, and when they get over this affectation, they're going to make coding agents profoundly more effective than they are today, by giving like a backhanded compliment to people who make those points. But I don't think that's like genuine. Like, people use the stochastic parrot argument or like a stochastic parrot phrase to dismiss repeated claims.
Well, so I mean, I think that he mentioned stochastic parrots in like the last paragraph, right? And I think that's so. The other thing that we want to talk about was like Emily Bender, like critiques of Emily Bender, basically, and also Timnit Gebru and generally people saying like, oh, stochastic parrots doesn't hold because blah 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 blah, and then they try to say, oh well, we're stochastic parrots and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I think that misses the point entirely of what stochastic parrots actually is referring to, and that is, what we put in is what we get out. What we're putting in is the world, essentially, like as it is, and that's full of bias, right? The text that we're putting in is full of bias, not just in what it says, but also in how and who it was written by. And so if you're saying, oh, they aren't just, the stochastic parrots thing isn't a valid critique, because actually they can do these other things now. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's a big mischaracterization of the argument itself.
Yeah, I went a bit rambly, and I will try to restate it concisely. You often see the word stochastic parrots being thrown about as a haha, see, not such a stochastic parrot now, and you see critiques making the argument that we are actually still dealing with stochastic parrots, that these LLMs are not exhibiting like actual cognition and reasoning, but they're still just regurgitating what is being put into it, being dismissed as, but look at what it does. And as some fancy schmancy semantic argument, people say, oh, but like, I make mistakes like that, therefore it is thinking like me. Or if you claim this is not real humans, show me what a real human is, I will make the LLM do the same thing. And that type of argument is basically the attempt to reduce a valid point via mockery without engaging on the actual point behind it, which is what you just said, that we put in everything and a lot of effort, and then the information retrieval system that we do, it can retrieve all of the skills that was put in, all of the patterns that were put in. So it is exactly a stochastic parrot, even if it is very impressive.
Yeah, and this sort of also goes to what you were saying, in like is trying to reduce the argument by trying to make a mockery of it, and representing it as a straw man of what it actually is. And this is like very clear, and I think Emily Bender recently wrote an article that was directly addressing someone else's writing, which is resistance isn't denialism. But basically, the first article that was written by someone else, essentially says, oh, now, all the people, all AI skeptics are just in denial that, this technology is going to change everything, that it's really good. And, we should sort of see them as sympathetic, like they're just in grief, right? And this is very intentionally trying to belittle the opposition. And what Bender says is, resistance isn't denialism. We're not we're not saying that like we think that these won't be there won't be some things that will stay changed because of this system. We're saying we don't think it's right, and that's a very different argument. And it's it's really convenient um, to frame it as denialism, and doing so just really misses the point. The article that I think Gary Marcus has one that he responded to some other guy back in like I don't know 2024 or something, where a similar thing happened. And regardless of what Igor I think about Gary Marcus's claims in general, it's just another example of skeptics being painted in a light that is not actually representative of what they think. And then there was even another one that was very
If I can
recent.
quickly, before we go into that one, on what you said about both Bender and Marcus. This happened with the NFT craze as well, and the crypto craze. Like, one of the points that people made, oh, but you haven't tried it, so you don't know. Like your opinion only counts if you have tried it enough that you agree with me. That was like the construction that was being used. And this is like a rhetorical technique that tries to capture like the framing of things, that like these things are so novel that you need to deeply engage with them, and when it is very obvious that they are useful, you will obviously agree with me. And the fact that you disagree with me is a sign that your opinion shouldn't be taken seriously, because you obviously haven't done that work yet. That is like the technique that Bender calls out there. And then the stochastic parrot one is kind of like a twist on that, where people just act as if somebody who is actually more familiar than them with a technique is missing the forest for the trees, where like an expert tells you this isn't what you think it is, and on top of grasping the other expert and saying, oh, but they say it is, you also say, nah, because here. And you just reverse who is missing the point, and then pile on the mockery. And I think it's important to track these like rhetorical techniques that are not about the content of what is being said. Like nobody engages in the actual argument to try to kind of like give their own line on when they would accept the claim of a stochastic parrot, or engage with the points that Emily and like the output that she was raised. All of the points about like labor laws being violated, or questionable labor practices in like labeling factories, all of the ghost worker harm, all of these things are not being engaged with. Instead, people are framing as, oh, but you're denying the good that could come from this. You're just a Luddite, because it sidesteps the uncomfortable discussion that they don't want us to have, because it will slow down the rollout.
And so, I mean, that's like the mental health issues that are an example of an issue that people are having a hard time doing that with, because it's so salient, and because it impacts children, which is historically a very good way to get action to happen on a political level, is to say, but think about the children. But really, it's shameful that this sidestepping has been allowed for as long as it has been. And just, I think that going back to the idea of what's being presented is not what people are actually thinking, or what the arguments, the against AI are. There was a recent article that talked about it was a critique of the AI Con, which was Bender and Alex Hanna's more recent book that came out in 2025. And there was one line that I thought was like particularly funny. So it mentions that the authors like discuss AI being used to produce slot blog articles and fill in for book writing, and that this seems odd because it contradicts their core thesis, which is that the systems are not good, right? Um, and specifically, the paragraph ends with, "If AI produces useless slop, then how is it replacing writers?" And to me, this just like really misses the point. It is the fact that, slop can be used to replace, blog post writers, or the copywriting on websites in certain cases, to me is not an indication that there is value in what the LLMs are outputting, but that um, it wasn't valued to begin with, which is something that I've said before. And if it wasn't valued to begin with, then a company is going to do whatever they can to reduce costs, and using a language model is less costly than using a contractor. So, yeah, I don't know. It feels very disingenuous to present these arguments in this way to me.
Yeah, and I think if we summarize it, then like the mythical AI bear is kind of characterized as like a bleeding heart, like woke academic in who cares about some semantic difference about special human quality of product or spark of the output, who's in denial of the productivity gains, and Zvi likes to use this phrase mundane utility, and just doesn't see it. There was another blog post called "Don't Fall for the Anti-AI Hype," which basically tried to like caution people not to fall for the idea that these tools can be ignored and frames them as inevitable. And all of these things, these like base motives, and like mainly out of ignorance and unfamiliarity and just not having engaged with it or being emotional, leading to something like an AI denialism or unreasonable AI skepticism that also kind of invents ideas of an AI bubble that is completely unfounded, and it's very obvious that there's value to be had here. And this is like the mythical AI bear.
And, with that, that's all the muck that we have for today. If you thought this was interesting, it would be great to share it. We really appreciate any and all feedback that we get. So leave a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. They really help the algorithm. Even if it's just a comment that says like this good, or a review that says something like that. It actually helps a lot. So yeah, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.